So, as most of you know, vacuum tubes have been around for over 100 years, and while they've been replaced by transistors in most electronic applications, there are still a number of people out there who covet the sound of the good old-fashioned vacuum tube. I'm talking about audiophiles, enthusiasts, people who feel like this old technology delivers a special sound that's missing from most modern devices. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to delve into the world of tubes by focusing on a product that comes straight out of Italy. Guys, I'd like to welcome you to my review of the MastersounD Box.
Is it getting better?
Alright, so here it is, the MastersounD Box. And if you're not familiar with MasterSound, that's okay, because even though this Italian company have been building high-end tube amps for many years now, the truth is they've only just recently begun to enter the international market. Now, what you're looking at is the entry level into their line. In fact, the box is something of a lost leader, which means whenever MasterSound sells a box, the company isn't really profiting off the sale that much, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to lower the price as much as possible to make it easy for customers to buy into the brand. And what they bank on is whenever that customer is ready to upgrade, they'll likely turn to MasterSound for that solution. Now, overall, this is a very well-built piece. It retails for $3,500 US, which isn't bad for something that's both designed and made in Italy. It weighs 52 pounds, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you try to lift this thing, the weight is so concentrated that it almost feels like a dying star. It's also a fairly large piece. It stands at 7 inches in height, 16 inches width, and 17 inches in depth. And overall, I love the industrial design here. It's clear that they put the money in the hardware. Everything here is clean, it's functional, and legible. We have the volume control on the side. We have our selector switch. We have the labels right here. We have a LED that will light up in red as you go throughout your different inputs. And yeah, so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pause the video, turn the unit around, and show you what's on the back. All right, so as you guys can tell, just like the front of the unit, the back is clean, legible, and very easy to understand. So to our left here, we have our bank of analog inputs. We have a tape output. I confess I wish this unit came with a variable pre-out, but it is what it is. Moving on, we have our speaker terminals. We have a ground, and then we have a 4-ohm tap and an 8-ohm tap. We have a print here that reminds you that you're going to be listening to a Class A single-ended amplifier. This amp actually runs in single-ended Pentode mode, and I'll get more into that later. Moving over, we have the logo, the serial number, and of course our Made in Italy badge along with our IEC. Now, before I get into the assessment, first let's take off the cover and look at what's under the hood, because come on, I mean, it's a tube amp after all. So let's get to it. All right guys, so this section is going to be a little bit ghetto because the only way that I can show off the inside of the amp is to put it on the floor and to hold the camera. It's not the most ideal situation, but we'll make do. Anyways, what you're looking at here is going to be an integrated amp that runs in single-ended Pentode operation. And basically, this is an affordable way to get single-ended performance from a typical tube. And what you're looking at here is going to be a set of EL34 power tubes. And these are specifically by Electro Harmonics. Honestly, not my favorite tube manufacturer, but given the price of this amplifier, I totally get why they would use them. So these EL34s make up the power, which as I think I mentioned before, will output 35 watts. And over here we have our signal tubes, and these are ECC 802s, a variant of the 12AU7. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are going to wonder, okay, well, can I roll tubes on this amp? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, it has an auto biasing circuit, so if you want to replace the power tubes, just replace them with another EL34, the circuit will auto bias and away you go. Now, it's important to mention that you need to check with your local distributor first to see if doing this is going to bust your warranty. I know the US distributor is okay with people rolling the signal tubes. I haven't really gotten a definitive answer out of them for the power tubes, so again, it's important to check. But at least the amplifier is capable of tube rolling very effortlessly. Now, as you guys may also notice, there are some hefty transformers in this unit. We have a number of iron core transformers, and as most tube aficionados will tell you, getting good sound is all about The iron. And from what I've been told, MasterSound winds most of their major power supplies, and the box is of no exception to that. So overall, this is a very sturdy, very well built machine, and it's basically designed to give you that single-ended sound while at the same time being able to match well with average efficiency loudspeakers. So that begs the question, how does it sound? Well, let's talk about that. Alright, so as most of you know, describing the sound of something can be difficult, especially when it comes to describing a component type that someone's never even heard before. I'm talking about flat panel speakers, vinyl, or in this case, tubes. So what I want to do is I want to first address those of you who've never even experienced a tube amp before. That way you'll know what you're stepping into should you decide to get something like the box. So think of it like this. Think of it like coloring with 2 crayons instead of just 1. And it's not that you're going to get more information from a tube amp than you will a similar priced transistor amp. Is that you should expect to hear more depth in the sound. It's like hearing extra layers within the music and something that sounds a little bit more three-dimensional than their transistor counterpart. Now this isn't always going to be the case, but this is usually what you experience with a good tube amp and why so many people love the tube sound. That and because tubes have a distortion that the human ear tends to find pleasant versus solid state that when it runs out of power it sounds like crud to our ears. Now, moving on, I want to address those of you who are familiar with this kind of thing, and I want to talk about what you can experience if you were to take the box home for yourself. So, in a nutshell, this is not going to be a solution for somebody who's expecting that typical single-ended, warm and sweet and beautiful presentation, something that just wraps around you and makes all of your recordings sound absolutely fantastic, because this is going to be more like a tell it like it is amplifier, and if anything, it's actually along the forward side of neutral. And let me explain this. I don't mean that the treble is bright. I don't mean that the treble is even aggressive. It's just, it has a way of projecting energy to where the top end definitely becomes noticeable. Now, the rest of the presentation is actually pretty balanced. The mid-range is very linear for what it is, and the bass, something single-ended tends to struggle with, especially when it comes to pairing up a single-ended amp with a more average efficiency speaker. Well, the box has no problems handling that, and that's courtesy of the big power supplies that are inside of it. And it's funny because when it comes to just raw current delivery, I admit I was questioning whether or not MasterSound was basically full of it because, look, at the end of the day, an EL34 tube is only capable of so much output power, even when you run them in quad, even in a push-pull configuration, even with running single-ended Pentode, there's only so much that they can give you. So I think MasterSound's done a great job of squeezing every ounce of power that they could from that tube type. And what this translates to is an amplifier that actually has no problems driving something like the Totem Acoustic Sky or the Mistrals or the Power Hungry Bouchards that I just got in. This amplifier actually, in a medium-sized room, will take those speakers to pretty loud volumes. Now, obviously, if you're somebody who likes to jam out and you like huge dynamics, then yeah, this is only going to do so much. Now, this leads me to my listening impressions. So I've come to find that what you take away from this experience just depends on what you connect to the amplifier. So going back to the average efficiency speakers like the Totem Sky and the Mistrals, you're going to get that depth to the sound. You're going to get that lit from within character, all the while reaping the benefits of what would ordinarily be associated with a good solid state design. Now I do admit that there is just a little bit extra in the mid-range, so when you listen to male vocals, there's not really chestiness. It just sounds pretty full. And if you have warm speakers, it may be too much of a good thing. But by and large, I would say that the sound is a lot more balanced and linear than one would expect from a tube amp at this price point. Now, where these speakers are where this amplifier really comes into its own is when you pair it with a very power efficient speaker, like the Tecton Design Double Impacts. That is a match made in heaven because there are no limitations in this regard. The speakers are so efficient that this amplifier will sound intensely dynamic, intensely accurate. That forward character that I was talking about perfectly complements the level, if not even smooth character of the double impacts. So what you get there is the best of both worlds. In fact, I was so excited when I first heard the comment that some of you know I even created a separate video about it, because that is a match made in heaven right there. And I know Tecton's going to soon be getting in a box for their own use and evaluation. So that's going to be pretty cool. So this amplifier, at the end of the day, I think it's incredibly well made. I think it has a surprisingly balanced and linear sound. And when it comes to various aspects of the performance, I'm surprised by how decent it sounds even on average efficiency speakers, even though I feel like it really comes into its own with speakers that are 96 dB or above. Still, it's not perfect, and that leads me to some of the things that you need to be aware of before you take this home. Alright, so first and foremost, this is a single-ended Class A tube amp, which means it runs hot. If you were to buy this, you need to make sure you have a lot of space to give it proper ventilation. I made the mistake of putting this on the bottom tier of my rack with my CD player above. My CD player actually shut down because it just got too hot, and I actually thought I ruined it entirely. Thankfully, I caught it right as things were starting to act a little funky, but that was a pretty big scare. So learn from me and do not put anything above this amplifier, nor do you want to put it in an enclosed space. Give it room to breathe. Next, and I think I already made this clear, if you're looking for that warm and friendly sound, this isn't going to be it. This is definitely going to be for somebody who appreciates a tube amp that has that depth, but otherwise has more attributes that are in line with a good solid state amp than your typical cliched tube sound. And then finally, I do wish that this came with a variable pre-out. I get it. A lot of people in most European markets and Asian markets, they don't use subwoofers with their setup, but here in the United States, it would be nice to have a pre-out so you could easily connect subs should you decide to do so. But otherwise, this is a very straightforward piece. It's very well built. There's not a whole lot to complain about, and that leads me to my final thoughts. You know, the box is such an interesting integrated amplifier because on one hand, it doesn't really have that beautiful character that a lot of audiophiles like from, say, single-ended triode amplifiers. Yet on the other hand, it has so many other virtues. I mean, the voicing is a lot more balanced than a lot of single-ended tube amplifiers, which means it allows loudspeakers to speak more with their own voice, which is very nice. This amp also has a lot of drive to it and is one of the few single-ended amps I've encountered that I could genuinely recommend to a wide variety of people, to include people that are using average efficiency loudspeakers. Unless you plan on having a rock concert in your room or you want chest-pounding dynamics, I mean, this is going to make for a consistently good match with a wide variety of products. Now, clearly, I think the box really comes into its own when you pair it with something that's power efficient, like the Tecton Design Double Impacts. That is a match made in heaven. But even if you don't, you're still going to reap a lot of the benefits of a single-ended design, like effortless detail, and of course, that depth that, quite frankly, is pretty addicting to listen to, and it's hard to go away from that once you get used to it. But ultimately, I would say this: the box is a great piece, and I think it represents a good value for the money. Now, I haven't had a chance to spend time with its competitors like the Prima Luna Dialogue, so I can't tell you guys exactly how those two would compare, but the fact is this: at least in the United States, there aren't too many good tube amplifiers under $5,000 in the US right now, and I think the box really is a standout, at least in my experience so far, and something that is worth considering for, I would say, a lot of people. So yeah, the box. Pretty cool integrated amp, definitely a musically engaging piece, and I've enjoyed my time with it. And that wraps up this review. So as always, guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.
Take these arms that were made for loving, and this heart that will beat for two. Take these